Hello and welcome to the News Centre. I'm Shireen Bhan. Big developments from the telecom space. The cabinet has approved a 1,64,000 crore rupee revival package for cash-strapped BSNL. Speaking at a press conference, Telecom Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said the package will be aimed at improving the quality of BSNL services and de-stressing the company's balance sheet. The cabinet has also approved the conversion of legacy dues worth 33,000 crores into equity. Separately, the race to acquire 5G spectrum has been stronger than expected. Government sources tell us that the bids received so far have exceeded 1.49 lakh crore rupees. We discussed the 5G auctions and the BSNL revival package with our guests in just a bit. But before that, here's the Telecom Minister Ashwini Vaishnav laying out the contours of the BSNL revival package, which has just been cleared by the cabinet.
तो आज कैबिनेट में BSNL भारत संचार निगम लिमिटेड के रिवाइवल के लिए 1,64,000 यानी 1,64,000 करोड़ का पैकेज अप्रूव हुआ है। BSNL के रिवाइवल के लिए 1,64,156 करोड़ 164,156 करोड़ का पैकेज अप्रूव हुआ है। इस पैकेज के 3 बड़े एलिमेंट्स हैं। पहला एलिमेंट है BSNL की सर्विसेज को अपग्रेड करने का, अपग्रेड करना, उसके मोबाइल सर्विसेज को और एक्सपैंड करना, क्वालिटी ऑफ सर्विस को इम्प्रूव करना, उसका एलिमेंट है। दूसरा एलिमेंट है BSNL की बैलेंस शीट को डी-स्ट्रेस करना। तीसरा एलिमेंट है BSNL के फाइबर नेटवर्क को किस तरह से एक्सपैंड करना, जिससे कि माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी का जो विजन है, हर घर तक फाइबर पहुंचे, हर घर तक ब्रॉडबैंड सेवा उपलब्ध हो, हर घर तक इंटरनेट सेवा उपलब्ध हो, उसको कैसे आगे ले जाया जाए।
Well, that is Ashwini Vaishnav, the Telecom Minister. Joining us now to take this conversation forward, Purushottam KG, Partner and Head for Digital Solutions and Telecom Leader at KPMG India. We're also joined by Sunil David, former Regional Director at AT&T, is also the Co-Chair for Digital Communications Working Group on the IET Future Tech Panel. Ankit Jain, Vice President and Sector Head at ICRA. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Before I get to the 5G auctions, let's discuss the decision taken by the Cabinet today to clear this 1.64 lakh crore rupee revival package for BSNL. Purushottam, let me come to you first. I'm just giving, for the benefit of our viewers as well as our panelists here, some of the details that have come in. This is going to be a support package for 4 years. 70% of the support is to be extended in year 1 and year 2, and this will also see the rollout of 4G by BSNL. The cash support, now this is important, cash support of 44,000 crore rupees and non-cash support of 1,20,000 crores. So that is how the 1.64 lakh crore is broken down. Purushottam, your thoughts on this revival package that's been now cleared by the cabinet for beleaguered BSNL?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think this package is extremely important, considering that you need every operator, every telecom operator in India to be focused on driving the network. You know that only 30% of the towers are fiberized. BharatNet is getting into its next phase of implementation. This revival package will help BSNL to not only restructure its capex initiatives, but also multiple initiatives, including pricing, quality of service, and customer service on the ground. Fair degree of tier 2 and tier 3 cities and customers in those cities use BSNL connections, and this is a very important initiative that has been rolled out. This will help de-stress not only the role that BSNL will play, but also will help them to focus on driving critical initiatives on the ground.
Yes, we are just working through the details of this decision that's been taken by the cabinet. And, just for the benefit again of our viewers who are tuning in, a 1.64 lakh crore rupee package for BSNL has been cleared by cabinet. Remember, this comes on the back of a revival package, a recovery or a rescue package that the government had cleared for the telecom sector. The big beneficiary there was Vodafone Idea. Remember, the government now is a significant shareholder in Vodafone Idea on account of the conversion of debt to equity. And that's what I want to now put forward to our guests as well, because even in BSNL, the government is now talking about conversion of debt to equity. BSNL, according to the telecom minister, has a debt of 33,000 crore rupees. That will be converted into equity, and sovereign guarantee bonds will be issued by BSNL to reduce the high cost of debt. In fact, the government is also looking at the possibility of sovereign guarantee bonds for MTNL. So I just want to get views from our panel on this, and let me go across to our other guests as well who are joining us here this evening. Let me go across to Ankit. Ankit, what do you make of the revival package that's come in for BSNL, specifically this business of conversion of debt to equity, as well as the possibility of the government now saying that sovereign guarantee bonds will be issued to try and bring down the high cost of debt?
See, first of all, I think that gives a very clear message that telecom is a very important industry. This is the second time that government has kind of bailed out an operator. Now, in terms of BSNL's dues, the company was in a stress situation, and the kind of cash flows were not sufficient to cover the debt obligations. So this will be a big relief for BSNL. It will help them roll out their services smoothly. And secondly, it will also help their vendors. So we're forgetting one particular important element here is their vendors, which have been in stress because of BSNL's non-payment or, lackadaisical payment structure. So with this, I think the payment mechanism to the vendors will also improve, and it will aid in the longer run, because BSNL has to roll out 4G and later on 5G. And a 3+1 industry structure will be beneficial for the country as a whole. So overall, again, as I said, government has demonstrated that they are willing to take a chance, take a leap, and keep this 3+1 structure alive.
Yes, clearly that seems to be the case as far as the government's intent is concerned. And, on one hand, what we've heard from the government is that it, especially in the case of privatization of Air India, it said the government has no business being in business, any kind of business, be it aviation. But in the telecom side, you're actually now seeing the government play an even greater role, not just for public sector companies like BSNL and MTNL, but in fact, even for private sector companies like Vodafone Idea. Sunil, where does this now leave the telecom landscape? You've, of course, got the two big boys, Jio and Bharti Airtel, a much diminished Vodafone Idea, but perhaps now trying to make a recovery on the back of the bailout that's coming from the government. And now with this revival package, hopefully a stronger BSNL as well. Where does this leave the telecom landscape to your mind?
Thanks, Shireen, for inviting me to the show, and good afternoon to all the viewers who are watching. I think it's a very important step taken by the government to revive BSNL, because, as Ankit mentioned, we definitely need 4 operators to operate in the telecom space. And I think what is very, very important, Shireen, is that BSNL has infrastructure in the remotest parts of India, right? We got to bridge that digital divide that exists. And given that BSNL has already got infrastructure in the remotest parts of India, including the remotest villages, I think what is very important is BSNL should really look at how to package services that are going to improve customer experience, how is it going to improve their operations, and give the big guns a run for their money. I think that's important, because otherwise we are going to end up in a duopoly kind of a situation. So I think, extremely good step taken by the government to help BSNL survive, and not just survive, but I hope just...
But isn't that easier said than done?
Yeah,
but isn't that easier said than done, Purushothaman? And I want to come back to you. Go ahead, Sunil.
I think it needs a lot more professional help. I think a lot more needs to be done in terms of how they rejig their management structure, get in a lot more professional help to really help them, survive this current very difficult phase, and even help them in the future. They have to do things differently. I don't think.
And that's what I want to address, Purushothaman. Unless there is a change. Unless there is a change in the style of functioning, in the way that services are rolled out, etc. And now, of course, the government is talking about, with this revival package, BSNL being able to roll out 4G. But let's also be very clear. I mean, the priority of addressing large parts of rural India continue to remain with BSNL. So how much is really likely to change for this company going forward, even though the government has decided now to put more money in?
So what is very critical here is to really, I mean, we don't know the details at this stage, but depending on how much money is actually allocated to capex and also maintenance on the ground, the current infrastructure itself require a fair amount of maintenance and then an upgrade, and which means an ecosystem of partners and OEMs will actually work on this space. So you are absolutely right that the most critical element of this is how is this actually implemented on ground? How are good OEMs working with the current organization? How is the current structure of monitoring the actual deployment on the ground? How effectively has that been done? And what is in store for that? Any rollout that actually happens on the ground will take anything between 12 to 18 months. It's very important to see how much of this actually goes into physical infrastructure, how much of it goes into managing the organization, the new org structure itself, and then also how does BSNL compete with private sector players on pricing, quality of service, and also network performance. We also need to know that the future is not only about telephony, it's about data, the quality of data, the content that goes into the data. So how much of this is also going to be used by BSNL to drive those kind of initiatives which will help the end customer. And when we are talking about rural areas, the content that is going to go to the rural areas are also very different. They have to be in specifically the vernacular language, and how is that actually transformed? How is BSNL going to use that will drive the future of how this is effectively deployed.
Yeah, and Ankit, that's what I want to address with you as well. I mean, a lot of this, is something that we will have to see how it pans out. How is this money utilized? What is this money utilized for, and so on and so forth. But the larger question is, you already have significant large private sector incumbents in the fray. And perhaps the more lucrative customer base is with the private sector. And for the lack of a better word, the low monetizable subscriber base is perhaps going to continue to live with BSNL. So really, where does this leave the company going forward?
You rightly mentioned just a couple of days back, TRAI came out with their quarterly report in which they said that the ARPU levels for BSNL MTNL is close to 50 rupees, whereas for the other private telcos, it is in north of 130 rupees. So that clearly explains the difference. But see, BSNL has that infrastructure in place, which is, very well penetrated. And secondly, you need a service provider which can bridge that digital divide, as Sunil rightly mentioned. So that way is the importance for BSNL continues. But yeah, their ability to actually turn around will be contingent on a lot of factors, a lot of internal rejigs. While we've seen one round of, VRS, which has resulted into a significant decline in the employee costs. But overall, they'll need to improve that EBITDA, ARPU levels to actually generate those kind of EBITDAs to be sustainable in the market, to kind of get the returns that is needed from the investments they'll do towards 4G. But as you rightly mentioned, they continue to remain the operator with very low or, very low ARPU customers.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a telling figure, 50 rupee ARPU, that's the average revenue per user for BSNL versus 130 plus for companies like Bharti. It's at about 170 odd. And the expectation, or certainly the hope, has been for those companies to take ARPUs up to 200 rupees. So you can tell the wide gap there between what the average revenue per user is and what the asking is, and which is why we've seen the telecom sector find itself in the predicament that it is currently and requiring a bailout, even in the private sector's case, from the government. But gentlemen, let's move away from BSNL and talk about the other big development, which is the 5G auction. Sunil, it's ahead of expectations, and nobody wanted the 700 megahertz, or it seemed like nobody wanted it because there were no takers in the last two auctions for the 700 megahertz band, and this time around it's a different story altogether. In excess of 1.49 lakh crore rupees already. Possibly we will cross 1.5. What do you make of what the 5G auction is telling us?
Right, so Shireen, I think the spectrum auction went on expected lines. We did expect the operators to bid for mid-band and the higher band spectrums, the millimeter wavelength spectrum. But I was pleasantly surprised when I heard that perhaps Reliance Jio may have bid for 10 megahertz of 700 megahertz spectrum. So there are definite use cases where 700 megahertz, the sub-gigahertz spectrum could be used. Has much better propagation characteristics, very good for indoor coverage. So there's obviously a premium that you have to pay for that, but then it gets offset because of the fact that the equipment that is needed to support that cost would be lower compared to the higher frequency bands, right? So I was surprised at the overall bids that were made yesterday. My anticipation was that we'll probably touch about 1.3 lakh crores. It is touch 1.45. We'll probably end up at 1.5 or 1.6. But by and large, it went on expected lines, barring the 700 megahertz spectrum, which perhaps Jio might have bid for, Shireen.
Right. Purushothaman, what do you make of how the 5G auction has panned out? And more importantly, services are expected to be rolled out perhaps at the towards the end of this year, October onwards is the expectation at this point in time. Given the rollout plans as well as the pan-India aspiration as well as the capex requirement, post the auction, what is it that you're going to be watching out for?
So, firstly, when the day one auctions got over yesterday, I was pleasantly surprised on how the 700 megahertz auction spectrum band has been bid for. We all know that it's an expensive band, but at the same time, it offers better connectivity, lower number of BTS towers to be rolled out to to service the spectrum utilization as well. And the use cases around the world for 700 megahertz has been not only internal use cases, broadcasting services are effectively done using 700 megahertz effectively in other countries. So it didn't come as a surprise when Jio actually bid for it. What came as a surprise was the level of utilization of the EMD on day one itself. If we look at the last few auctions in the last decade or so, I don't think the EMD has ever been utilized except in 2010 when there was an effective utilization of the EMD. In the last few years, except for the 3 years when it was subdued, where the utilization was only 21%, in all other years, the utilization has been in the range of 85 to 87%. So my expectation from day two clearly was that it will not, the EMD utilization will not exceed 90% of the EMD that has been actually provided by the operators. Now, coming to, obviously, if Jio has bid for 700 megahertz, the other operators have taken some part of the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, and Vodafone Idea has probably gone into it 900, 1800, and 2100. And obviously, the very specific details on which operators have spent and taken which spectrum will eventually come out. But logically, this is the way it would have actually spanned out. Now, coming to the very important point that you mentioned on what next, there are two important things that are critical to be monitored. One is the ecosystem around rollout. How effective that is will drive the faster rollout of the entire spectrum. And this ecosystem comprises of two parts. One is the CPEs, or the customer premise equipments, mobile handsets, and those kind of devices which are end users, but also equipments that need to be network equipment that needs to be rolled out on the ground. Only 5 to 7% of the mobile handsets currently are are 5G enabled. So there will be an important development in terms of how the mobile handset will get rolled out. We also need to very clearly watch out for very specifically, the initiative by the government for rolling out, the joint initiative by ITI and CDOT on rollout of the Make in India stack, which will have a very positive impact. And I'll be very keen to understand what kind of equipments are getting rolled out through that and how that will play a critical role in developing India as a hub for the rollout around, around the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, all of those factors are going to be factors that we need to watch out for. But Ankit, let's talk about what the impact is likely to be on a sector that's already been stressed and is trying to work its way out of this stress. Now, the good news is that, this is a 20-year period that we're talking about, spectrum for 20 years, repayment plan is for 20 years. And if I take a look at some of the projections that are being made, for instance, Nomura says that it's expecting a 13,000 crore rupee upfront payment this fiscal year from these auctions, and that's likely to be the annual number as we move forward. So what do you see as being the impact of the 5G auction on the balance sheets of telcos?
See, one part is the likely stress. The days of stress are, clearly shadowing past us. We are looking at a more clearer picture wherein, the pricing power, there is a restoration in the pricing power to some extent. We've seen a couple of rounds of tariff hikes which have actually given the required organic cash flows for the industry. So one thing is for sure that, there has been some improvement as far as the cash flow generation is concerned. However, having said that, the overall debt levels continue to remain very high. There was around 4.7 lakh crores as of March 22. And we expected a 1 to 1.1 lakh crore of participation. And these are now, most likely they will cross 1.5 lakh crores. So we're looking at a debt of almost 6 odd lakh crores for the industry as a whole. However, the best part is as you rightly mentioned, the payment plan. The payment plan is very favorable. We have a 20-year loan at a 7.2% fixed interest rate, and with an option of prepayment protecting the NPV of the overall payments. So that way it is very lucrative, and that is, I think, one of the foremost reasons why the participation has been as healthy as we are seeing as of now. The upfront payments will be close to, if we were to talk about 1,50,000 crores, 1.5 lakh crores of participation, the upfront payment will be close to 14,000 odd crores, which is a very, which is not a sizable amount in the current scheme of things. So while rollout remains a challenge because the kind of fiberization, as Purushottam mentioned, that it is almost 30 odd %, the required infrastructure expense could be slightly on the higher side. But we don't expect that this would be a carpet bombing or, a pan-India launch with a full hue and cry as 4G was. It will be more, pocket specific, although it can be across all the circles, but again, pocket specific. And so that way the capex can be phased out, and upfront payment is anyways very low. So that these will give some boost or some, some relief to the balance sheet, the telecom operators.
Well, gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us here to address both those big developments from the telecom sector. Interesting times, certainly, and of course, we are still waiting for more clarity on how both these issues are likely to pan out and what these could mean for the consumer and for the health of the telecom sector. Purushottam, Sunil, Ankit, appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV18 News Center. Well, the other big story that we are tracking, the aviation regulator has directed that only 50% of the flights approved under SpiceJet's summer schedule be allowed to operate. Now, remember, here's the background. Remember, there were several incidents that took place pretty much day after day, forcing the DGCA, which is the aviation regulator, to issue a show cause notice to SpiceJet. SpiceJet has responded to that show cause notice, and the DGCA's order, which has been issued today, is in response to that. So this is after the DGCA has gone over the response from SpiceJet to the regulator's show cause notice. The regulator is essentially saying that you will need to cut your departures that have already been approved for the summer schedule by 50%, and that is going to be for a period of 8 weeks. The airline has to ensure that it runs a safe, efficient and reliable air transport service, and the DGCA is going to be enhancing its surveillance, it's going to be enhancing its monitoring of SpiceJet, and it will review the operations of SpiceJet before taking a call on whether it can go back to running as per capacity that has been approved by the regulator. But as of today, this is on the back of the show cause notice issued by the regulator to SpiceJet and SpiceJet's response. SpiceJet's summer schedule has been cut by 50%. How is the airline now going to be able to make good on bookings, etc., that may have already been done? What is this going to mean in terms of the number of aircraft that will be operational as part of its fleet? What happens to connectivity and how they rebalance their network? This is going to be very, very important. This is an important development here, not just for SpiceJet, for the aviation sector as a whole. Remember, you have Akasa Air taking to the skies with 2 aircraft, and that is going to take off on the 7th of August, but it is only 2 aircraft to start with. But you're now going to see a 50% cut in capacity, in flying capacity, on account of the DGCA cracking the whip on SpiceJet. That's it then on this edition of News Center. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.